I know people are still going to filter in. Feel free to leave I like to say this at the top of every Zoom session I'm in. Feel free to leave your cameras off. We all have Zoom fatigue and there's no pressure to be on, although we do love to see people's faces. My name is Cario Klein and I'm with Travis Cohn. We're from Double Edge Theater. And we're going to go into ourselves a little bit in a second and sort of talk about what we're sort of this session is about. But just some announcements first. I do want to acknowledge that right now we're at the point of the day where looks like we're going to hear a verdict in Minneapolis about any minute now. So we totally understand if people need to be off camera or leave at any time or need to do whatever you need to take the space around what's going on in Minneapolis. I also want to acknowledge that right now this session is being recorded, and also people once again don't need to be on camera. And also this is going to be what we're hoping is going to morph into more of a discussion rather than a lecture. So feel free to leave questions in the comments and we're happy to respond to those as sort of they come in, or if maybe we'll push to the end depending on what we're getting through. We're really excited to be here. So with that, the last thing I want to do is acknowledge that Travis and I are coming from Double Edge Theater, which is based in Western Massachusetts, which is also Nipmuc land. It's really important for us and for the community, and I think everyone to really acknowledge the Indigenous people who have preceded us and to this day are still in the places where we are. We don't want to invisibilize them currently or what they've been doing before. So I want to acknowledge that and hope that you all can find some time and maybe figure out who the Nipmuc people in your place. And then, or still are. The other thing I want to say is if you, we ask that people stay muted if you're not asking a question, just because it can, noise can bother some folks. And if anybody needs any accessibility things, Travis and I are happy to help in terms of that. Do you want to start by introducing yourself, Travis? And maybe talk just to introduce Double Edge very briefly before we go into it more.
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Travis Coe. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of Double Edge Theater. As Cario was saying, Double Edge is based in Ashfield, Massachusetts. And we are a theater company that works with art. We also have a lot of different programs, including student programs, community programs, and other things like that. And I want to begin by sharing a video about us, so it gives you a little bit more context so you can start to see where we're coming from as we get into the topic of discussion, which will be art justice in the times of COVID. So I'm going to share my screen now.
We are Double Edge, an international theater ensemble based in rural Ashfield, Massachusetts. We are an ensemble and company of interdisciplinary artists called to create the highest vibrancy of art in deep dialogue with the communities where the work takes place. We call this living culture. At the core of our work is our art. Double Edge creates performances that are visual, visceral, dreamlike, mythic, and intimate. Our aesthetics celebrate imagination, flight, and the human potential. Our indoor performances tour around the US and overseas. Double Edge also performs indoor-outdoor traveling spectacles across our farm in Ashfield. These larger-than-life spectacles take place in pastures, streams, gardens, and under the starry sky, and immerse the spectator in mythic storytelling. Our training is an original performance creation methodology. It is how we grow ourselves, as well as the next generation of artists. Our training is physical, musical, visual, vocal, and encourages one to go beyond personal limits. This work extends into our work with youth and education across rural and urban communities. Double Edge was founded in 1982 as a feminist theater by Stacy Klein in Boston. Today, Double Edge is a company of over 20 artists and staff members who hail from Ashfield to Argentina and beyond. In 1994, Double Edge moved to Ashfield to the former Fitzgerald family dairy farm. Today, the farm is our center for 4 seasons of performance, collaboration, training, and exchange with our community. We make art, we farm, we teach, and we gather community members and artists from around the world. We believe that the interaction between artists and community creates a living and vibrant culture capable of transforming society. This begins in our hometown of Ashfield, a small, rural, one-time dairy farming community in western Massachusetts. From farmers to artists to stonemasons to musicians, our collaborations run far and wide, and the border between art and life is porous. For 25 years, Double Edge and our town of Ashfield have been helping each other to grow and evolve. We not only do this in Ashfield, but in rural, urban, and far-flung communities worldwide. We see the power of art to transform community. We began small, with as little as 45 people attending 3 nights of our first summer spectacle in 2001, to 1,000 in 2008, to 5,000 in 2018, to today, at home and on tour, as many as 10,000 spectators experience and are touched by our work. From the social fabric to the economic, our impact on the life of our community has grown while we have. Over the years, as our budget has grown, so has our impact on revenue and job creation. From youth retention to contributing to a sense of place, we see ourselves as a model for vibrant, arts-driven community development. If you put a pin on the map for all the places we have touched, from spectacles to indoor performances to training workshops, and all the places our students have come from to work with us, you can see Double Edge's impact is local, national, and global. Our vision is to create living culture through an art justice lens and restoring a sense of justice to our society through the power of artistic and cultural dialogue. From Okiteu to increasing access to our performances and training, to greening and healing our planet, we are growing our impact. Join us in creating a living culture.
All right, we're back.
So that was a little bit of an intro about Double Edge, and I think we're here to specifically talk about one aspect which touched upon in the video, which is called art justice. But before we get into that, Travis, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. So once again, I'm Travis Coe. I'm the Associate Artistic Director. My pronouns are he, him, his. As a part of my job as Associate Artistic Director, I do many things. I'm an actor. I co-create a lot of the work since I've been here for the last 5 years. I also do a lot of stuff in marketing and in enrolling our students into the training programs. I'm also a filmmaker as well.
So Travis did the film you all just watched.
Yes, I edited that film you just watched.
So my name is Cariel Klein. I use they and she pronouns. I've been with Double Edge now for 5 years full time. And I am the associate producer at Double Edge, which means I do a lot of things like sort of more on the coordination and logistics side. One of the things that I do is also coordinating the residency program here. And I do art justice coordination with Travis. I also do logistics management, as well as I perform, and I'm an aerialist with the company, and we're both ensemble members. So I guess we should start with what art justice means.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to begin by reading to you our visions and mission statement, I think that will also continue a little bit more about how we're articulating ourselves in this time. And I think it's important, but so I'm going to start there. Our vision is to prioritize imagination in times of creative, emotional, spiritual, and political uncertainty. Our mission is to pursue authenticity, interaction, identity with whomever is seeking creative, emotional, spiritual, and political clarity. Our art, performance, visual, multimedia is grounded in a rigorous ensemble aesthetic, unfolded in dream, imagery, metaphor, mystery, and symbolism. Our art, cultural, economic, our work, cultural, economic, organizational, personal, political, is created and sustained with an open, honest, meaningful, relevant, shared experience. We call this living culture. Our dedication is to face isolation and erasure, to face despair and pain that can translate into personal incapacity and political paralysis, to uplift. We call this art justice. Art justice has been a part of Double Edge since the beginning, but really was really coined in 2016. And after a lot of the listening and research I did, I can see sort of how from 40 years ago, it's been sort of become articulated. And I think in this time that we're living in, it's really important that we're calling it right now. And it really speaks to what our ensemble and company are seeing that's happening, and that art can't really happen without justice, and that justice can't really happen without art, and how we share that with our community and then the world, especially on our touring in different rural communities that we make work in and share work in. And I think in 2016, when we're in the process of this search of how do we articulate ourselves, it was a time where the president was saying misogynist things about women. And as Black folks were continued to be killed on our streets by the police officers, and as this, as the world is quickly growing into this environmental and climate emergency. So we were really asking at the moment, how do we respond to these times that feels poignant and that feels real to us? And how would we continue to uplift us and not feel stuck, but say, okay, we believe and we want to work towards its realization in a full body way, in a full soul way, with our whole selves. So art justice is birthed, and then since the time, I feel it just really makes sense for our future work and how we want to respond to the world. I just saw that the verdict was guilty. So how does justice continue to thrive and change society and change people's minds? And for us, how do we do that with our art? So it's obviously, I just want to take a moment to let that sit in before saying more. Thank you. No, I think I can continue on. It's obviously a moment for me. I'm a little I feel a little bit speechless in some ways, because this is a continuing thing that's happening in this country, where my folks, as a Black man, as a Latino man, As a gay man, I've seen a lot of death and felt that. And it feels like at this moment, there's a little bit of a, once again, how do we keep going? How do we keep moving forward? So I want to continue, and I want to speak to this moment, especially living in a rural space. It might feel at times, and I've heard this before by my friends, I'm from a city. I was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey, right next to Newark. And I hear a lot of people talking about being in a rural space and how it might seem isolated or in a bubble. And I think it's really important for us to keep creating our work in dialogue with what's happening in our community and in the world. And so I think art justice translates to how we work with our students from all over the world. As you saw in the video, we've worked with people from everywhere, with our community, and find ways to create sustainable models for a thriving culture. And I think really poignantly to me right now is safety. So I'm going to leave it at that and take a moment to sit with this a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Travis and I had a script and we're throwing it out the window. I think that it's really important. An important aspect of art justice is to be able to respond and be nimble. And I also want to leave space for any folks to maybe, if you want to turn off your camera or leave your cameras on, turn on your cameras or leave your cameras off, but to have a space to respond for a second, because I don't believe that the right thing is always to just push through. It's not the right way to just push sometimes. And also no pressure to say anything. Thank you all for being here with us. Sometimes it can be really hard to process publicly. So thank you for grace as we're giving space and grace to each other.
I love that, grace.
Yeah,
like I really.
Grace is a nice. It's a nice thing to think about,
like we're all sort of moving through life, and I like to think that we're doing it together. No matter where we are and we're from, it's so important that in these moments that we can hold the space and we can say, like, just feel all the things that we're feeling with grace. Yeah.
To talk more, I think, wow, it's hard to find the words right now to respond, to go from. I think that there's, everything you said is so correct. I can talk about my personal journey with art justice, because I think maybe something of there's value in that, even as we look towards this moment. When I first heard about the term art justice, which is different from when you first heard the term, we were working, I had just really started working full-time for the theater, and we were working on a performance called the Town Spectacle and Culture Fair. And one of the things was we were working with the whole performance was about the beautiful and wonderful nature of our rural town. What I would say is the subversive nature of our town. Surprisingly to us, things we didn't know. Things like that it was first, what is the word? It's not settled, but there's a word.
Like it was first, it feels like it was first sort of the name, like Ashfield or Huntstown as it was.
Right.
The first land that was given after the war was to Heber Honestman and Susanna Honesty, which were two African-American freed slaves. And they got a portion of the land, and they were really here before any of the other new settlers had sort of come in. And this is also after the Nipmuc people and other native folks had lived here for millennia.
So we were finding out this really wonderful radical nature of this town that none of us knew. And one of the things we said, well, we went to the Historical Society and said, well, what about the indigenous people who live there? And they said, oh, there were never any indigenous people here. They lived over in Maine, they were on the Cape, but we didn't have any in this area. There's some others. And we thought, well, that can't be right. That's not what it is. And luckily we were, we knew this woman named Rhonda Anderson. And she is now the Western Massachusetts Native Affairs Coordinator. But at that point she wasn't. And luckily, she is Inuit Athabascan, but Alupiak Athabascan, but she lived here and grew up here. And she said, that's not true. Not only were there Native people here, but there are still Native people here, and you should be talking to them. And she said, I think that everyone should be talking to them, but you specifically, if you're talking about this justice work, you need to talk to them. And so one of the things that happened was that we were introduced to them, and we asked, well, what can we do? What do you need? And they said, we need space. So when I was introduced to this conversation, it was sort of like what I would say, the beginning of a long relationship that's now sort of expanding, but it was sort of like, what can we do as a theater that's working towards this concept of art justice? And one of the things that we have that we might not have a lot of capital, but we have a lot of space. And how can we offer that? And not what they said was, we were like, well, what about UMass doesn't have, and they were like, well, we have, the colleges give us space, but it's to do the things that they want to do. They want us to come in and teach lectures about our own persecution. We don't need that space. We need our own space to do our own things that we want to do. And we were like, okay, we can do this. So that conversation was sort of the beginning of my journey. And I can go a little bit more into how Okiteo has evolved with us as our partners and now what they do. But do you want to say about where you
do? Yeah, because it's great, Kara, what you're saying. And I feel in a similar way about how I tell my stories. And as I said, I'm from New Jersey. I was never really in a rural space before coming to Double Edge. So it was sort of a culture shock. I was like, wow, the cows are my neighbors. And there's an immense amount of quiet that's in this space. And then the other thing that I noticed quite quickly was, wow, this town is very white. How could I build a home here? How could I envision myself living here for longer than the year that I had just first signed my contract? And I was lucky enough to land a job doing enrollment here. So that really was like my way in. I was like, oh, I know how this should go. Like, I should hit up all of my friends back in Chicago and Jersey and in New York, and I should be like, come to the theater and come be here for some time. Because what I found beautiful about this space was the quiet that I had never experienced before, was the space to go inside of myself and say, wow, there's a kaleidoscope of beauty and of joy and of love here. I can be outside running in the fields. I can be creating art with other people who are also dedicated to that practice and making theater. And so I was in this place where art justice was being created. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic, because I have the power is kind of in my hands to figure out how to, at least on the student body level, can we bring people here, which has been a wild journey, and it has its ups and downs. Like, some people come here and are like, I love it and I want to come back. And others are like, it's kind of scary. Yeah. Like, I don't know how to be in that kind of space when my hair looks like this, and when people are driving by in their cars, they're whipping their necks, like, who is that person? And it could even be friendly. Like, there's a lot of friendly people in this town and people who are just curious, but that feeling that you get when you're in an unknown space can be frightening. And so for me, I was trying to build up my courage. And not that I necessarily had to do that in this space, it just something felt right to me. And so then as I was doing my enrollment work, I was also creating a solo performance that I didn't know that I would continue on here and sort of produce here and do, but it was really about my life. And at first it was really about a lot of the struggles that I had. And then something transformed in me being in this space, being like, I'm so sick of sharing all of my pain with people all the time. All of my work as a Black person, as a Latinx person, as a gay man, doesn't have to be about how shitty sometimes life can feel. Like, what if I chose a different route? And with Double Edge and their aesthetics of dream and imagination and flight, I could imagine myself for the first time doing some of these things, like flying in the air, and saying, yes, I am Black and I am gay and I am love and I'm light. And so I started to create work on that. And that became a real shift for me. And what was the most incredible thing is how everyone in this space, though it's a majority white ensemble, really lifted me up. And that was really helpful for me. And it doesn't, like, no one has to do that. But then I was like, oh, these folks are being real about what they're saying. They are providing for me a platform to do my work and create my art. And so I really think about this way of shifting the narrative. And I think it's important then how we share that stories with the community, because now they're seeing new stories. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's a really important point, is that for us, when we think about art justice has two factors. One is justice for an art justice for us and our work and the love of that, and like the internal, and also how we're thinking about uplifting the world.
Yeah.
And that world could be our town, that world could be our students, that world could be anyone who we're interacting with. When we're thinking about bringing people in for residency, the goal isn't like fit them in to what we do. The goal is, how can we lift their needs up? How can we invite them in? How can we have radical hospitality and bring them into this space where it's not a comfortable, safe a space. I stopped saying that spaces could ever be safe a while ago, because they're just not, and it's unrealistic to try and promise that. But what you can offer is realness, is some sort of like radical honesty as well. Like, this is where you're coming to, this is what we have. And I think thinking about that also is really important as to how we thought about COVID.
Yeah.
And how we were thinking about, because we're a large group. We use our artistic work to pay for 22 people on salary. That's quite a few people to be supporting and on just artistic work. So for us, it's really a question of, like, especially when COVID hit, is how can we still support all these people, but also how can we maintain our values? Yeah. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, and I think one of the responses, it was sort of COVID came quickly in a lot of ways, and I think I remember we were in Boston in about February. We were in Boston in February, and I love going to Chinatown. And I remember I was eating like so much food and talking to people. And I remember seeing on the news, and I hadn't heard about this coronavirus before. And I'm sitting there and I'm sort of like, and I'm looking, and it's this Chinese station, and there's subtitles on. I'm seeing, what is this, like, coronavirus? And then life continues on. You're sort of just like, okay, like maybe it's not that big. But little did we know, I guess, or maybe if you were in the know or in the right groups, little did we know that it was or had already started spreading. And then we get to March and our whole tour is shut down. We were basically on a multi-month tour that we had planned for 2 years. Figuring out who our partners were going to be, how we're going to take 2 performances, who's going to drive the truck and all those things. And then you just suddenly get hit with, like, we were in a festival and they were like, okay, we have to shut down the festival. We just finished our first performance.
Yeah, we were in the middle of this multi-state, like all national and international tour. And at the start of Curtain Call, the woman who ran the festival, and unfortunately this group no longer exists as a casualty of COVID, but they came to me and they said, it's looking like we're going to shut down the festival after this weekend. They just announced that we can't have more than 100 people, but you're going to be able to finish your run. And by the time curtain came down, they said, we're shutting down the festival. We're going to start sending you back home tomorrow. And that was like a big shock for us.
Yeah.
And I think the immediate reaction that we had was, we need to start putting, or like some of us, I would say that I was probably one of the guilty ones, was how are we going to put out a product so that we can respond to COVID?
Oh, for sure.
That was like immediately like, how can we monetize something? And there were a few difficulties to this. One was, I mean, we live in a rural area. Broadband is just non-existent here. I mean, like our bandwidth is so minimal. This is even incredible right now because we just got on fiber optics like maybe 3 months ago, but holding Zoom calls was almost impossible. And then the other thing is our work isn't meant for online. It just isn't. And part of our work, like we've talked about, is the conversations that we can have afterwards. And I do consider that a part of art justice, was like the accessibility of our work. And so we took a break. We came home and we just said, we're gonna grieve. We're gonna have some time to just be in our bodies and feel what we need to feel. And after we took this like maybe 1 to 2 week time of just figuring out what we needed, we decided we weren't going to make online content, and we decided to not do that.
Yeah. And then I think that brought us into maybe, I don't even know, maybe it was a month or so after, maybe 2 months, quite a bit of time. And then we had decided that we wanted to, after hearing a lot of people, we started talking to a lot of people, and people were emailing saying how sad they were, how depressed they were, how it feels like everyone was locked into their house. And we were, like, that was the reality of it. And we had, I think what was really helpful is that we had the power of a group and our togetherness. And we had sort of then said to each other, how do we give back to the community? How do we share something with them that will lift their spirits up? And so we began talking about doing a summer spectacle, but a summer spectacle that was different than we had ever done before. And one that would obviously have to be extremely safe. And that would be, that would hopefully invite people to come in and feel like I wasn't going to catch COVID. So maybe, Cara, you can talk more about that if you want to, or we can leave that too.
I mean, I think that we did a lot of work with our local Board of Health for the town and also the state. And we had asked a lot of questions, but we realized that one of the things we needed to do for ourselves and for the community was to do work. And we made a lot of decisions, like we were only accepting audiences of at most 45, and they were in groups of 15, and they were spread out all over our farm. And they were in these 3 groups, and they would never interact with each other in all these outdoor spaces. There was no sitting close to each other. Everyone was required to be masked. And we encouraged audience feedback because we wanted to make sure that people felt safe. And it was like a collaborative thing. In some way, it was like that I've never felt more connected to groups of people than I did that summer, because we were all in this sort of together. We were even able to accept students, and the way that we did this, and the reason that Travis and I are sitting next to each other, is that Double Edge was able to create a pod. We podded with our group. We have a lot of very weekly conversations about how we're interacting with the outside world and what we're doing. And because of that sort of communication, that community that we have, we were able to create this space and to create performative work, which was really important for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, that takes a lot of trust. And I think it couldn't have happened, especially with a group, had we not built trust, like some people 40 years. Between 40 and Cariel and I, in these 5 years, it's like we're also the youngest members of the ensemble. And so it was hard. I love going dancing. Every weekend, I was like, I go dancing out and I like go hang out with friends. And that was really difficult. Like, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. But we had built trust around each other and we had dedicated ourselves to being in that space together and really potting and not going out and about and hanging out with this one or being with that person. And so it really helped. And I think trust was so important in making that work for us.
And to this day, we haven't had a case of COVID in our community because, because we've been pretty vocal about how to do this. And I think that this relates, it all relates to art justice. It's sort of hard to describe art justice because I believe it tentacles into everything that we do. But it related also to our availability to then accept people for residencies in the fall. And actually earlier than that. But we had folks who reached out to us that were people of our community that we worked with before who were in the city. And they were like, we need space. All the spaces are shut down. We can't make work right now. Can we come out and be with you for a week or 2 weeks and just make stuff? And we were like, yeah, why not? We got space. Let's figure this out. So because of COVID, it was really difficult, but we were able to offer space to, I think, 5 different artists who came out and did their own work over a period of time. And they were able to share that. We had a very close collaborator, Ebony Noel Golden, who came out here for 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And she was in the fall and she did a lot of dreaming and brainstorming here. And that is part of our justice work, like the ability to offer what we have. And I think that that's a question for everybody to think about, is like, not everyone can offer everything. And I don't think that's even right. I think that offering everything is false, because I have a lot of conversations with people about when you offer something but you can't do the follow through.
Yeah.
But offering what you can offer with the support to see that gift through is the start of every conversation that I have about art justice. Because, for instance, when you offer something and then you can't help see it through, it's actually worse than not offering anything at all sometimes. If you're gonna, for instance, in working with the indigenous group that I work with, Okiteo, if I say I'm going to do something and then I do a little bit, but then I sort of leave it to them to finish and they don't have the capacity to do it, that's worse than just not doing it and saying we need to pause. So a lot of conversations we have are, how can we do this and how can we do this in the right way, both for ourselves and for whoever we're working with.
Yeah, I think also we as a company, Cario is the word radical hospitality and radical honesty. And I think we are extremely generous people. And sometimes that can be to our detriment. Sometimes that can be like, we're trying to do just too much. And especially in in the times of COVID and that we're still living right now, we have to be really careful about how we're interacting with people who are outside of our pod and how we bring them inside of that and nurture that. And I think that's so important. So what's that line? And I think that's a question. And I imagine that everybody in this space that we're in right now on this Zoom call has had those questions for yourself about, like, what does that, what would that entail? How do I protect my family? What does it look like to even go to my job? There's a lot of things happening. And I want to uplift all the people who have been going to work, our healthcare workers, grocery store workers, everyone who's really helped continue and let us have food and took care of us. So if any of you are in this space right now, thank you. And in the other outside of this, as it's being recorded, thank you. I also wanted to say one thing about, you can feel free. We invite you to drop any comments you want in the chat of questions you might have as we keep going along, just to give yourself, if you just have something that's like, you're like, I really want to ask this thing that maybe relates, or if you're just like, I still don't understand what you're talking about. We invite you to do that if you'd like.
Yeah, and we'll definitely also have time at the end for some questions, some comments, whatever you all have. I think the last thing that is really important for me to say related to art justice is that it's something you sort of touched on earlier. Art justice, it's really easy to like sort of list out what art justice means in terms of external. Like, it means we're doing residencies, it means we're offering scholarships, it means we're helping folks who can't pay for tickets find affordable options to be able to afford things. But what does art justice also look internally? Like, what does it look like? So how is it that we're making sure that we are taking care of ourselves? Or when a community member is going through a really hard time, that they feel support? The last ever, but specifically the last, year and a half, have been very emotionally and physically and everything difficult for everybody. So how are we showing up for those moments? I think that it's a really important question for all of us.
Yeah.
And how are we doing that?
Yeah, it is. I think of that question, I thought a lot about that in this time of how am I showing up for myself in this time period, because I'm a person, as I think why I'm at Double is because I push ahead. I say, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. And I go full force into it. And when COVID hit, I got to finally, I think for the first time in my life, sit back and sleep and rest and go, I'm not gonna try to make a new product. I'm not gonna try to make a new solo performance. I'm going to just take this space to be like, it's okay. It's okay to say, I can get that extra couple hours of sleep. It's okay for me to say, I can read this book tonight, which I haven't been able to read a book for a long time. So that was something. And I think that was important of how we ourselves internally were having that conversation with each other, because I think a lot of what Karia was saying was like, we are definitely people who like, we want to do so much. We want to accomplish so much in our lives. And how do we take that space to have that rest? And I think that is justice. And I feel that is so important, especially as I talk to other folks our age. There's a lot of that feeling of like, of anxiety, of like, how I'm not doing anything. I've just started my life in some ways. Like, I've just started my career and now I'm being laid off, or now I'm doing that thing. And it was so important for us to say, okay, how do we take a step back and ask ourselves what we need? And that became really important. And then it started to translate into like, what does our art need? Like, what do we want to create with our art that speaks to the world and what we need as performers or as artists? Like, how are we going to do that? And that was really illuminating. Like, I think that we've done some of, I would say, some of our deepest work in this time, because it's just so different. We got to slow down finally instead of racing somewhere.
Yeah, I think that one of the biggest parts of art justice is honesty, and honesty with yourself and honesty with your community. It's really easy to perform justice work. And it's so easy to fall into that trap of that performance. We all have fallen into that moment of like, this is what I need to do, so I'm going to do it. but that performance is a trap because it's going to trap you in yourself and your paralysis about not doing enough because you're not performing enough. And it traps everybody else because of just wrong expectations. So starting with honesty with yourself, with the people in the room, with the people that you think might not be in the room. That's like, somebody was talking about vulnerability earlier, and I think this is vulnerable work. Justice work, art justice work, and art, all three of those things are vulnerable things. And if you take out the vulnerability, it just becomes performative, and not the fun kind of performative. The performative that's just not in the heart.
Yeah. And that, I think, and my feeling of that too, is that performative justice, it's like, we have to somehow figure out how to get rid of that. And I think that is a part of like how we just take a step back sometimes and go, we are not going to do that thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even if it's like what we really, really want to be doing right now. Sometimes it's like what Karia was saying, sometimes it's way worse to only give half of it and then have to back up because you're so spent. And it's so important that we go all the way and that we keep figuring out a real dialogue. And I think that's a part of our work. That we're in communication with our community and with our friends and with the world. And we're not just like, here is our statement and goodbye. Like now we fade into the darkness and go back to our art making within that bubble that people can sometimes think is a very rural thing.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite quotes, and I also heard Travis saying it this week, is we move at the speed of trust. And once you take that out in any of these conversations, in whatever environment you're in, you've gone too far. And yes, sometimes you need to push the envelope. And I think I can say that, and I do say that often as a white person. My job in my work is to be able to be pushed in ways that I'm not going to be comfortable. But there also has to be trust. And people, like, for instance, when I'm talking about bringing people to this space, people have to trust me. If I bring them in here and there's no trust, it doesn't work. It puts people and it puts ourselves into situations that are very tenuous. So when we're talking about anything, we talk about what is that speed of trust?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I think it's an interesting conversation also to have when you're thinking about what am I doing? It's so easy to go into a community and be like, this is what I want to do. But if you don't have the community's trust, I think a lot about Double Edge, when Double Edge came to Ashfield, which is 27 years ago, 28 this year, we moved into a town. We were a bunch of theater people from Boston, and we didn't have any connection to rural Ashfield. There was no connection to any of the community here. And we were a bunch of people from the city, and we said, whatever, we're just going to pick a spot on the map and go. And the community for a long time thought that we were a cult. And I honored that because I don't think that we did enough before moving here to have that conversation about what we are. We were sort of like, well, we can have that place and not be a part of that community. And that just doesn't work. Yeah. And it took over 10 years of really establishing trust, because they thought, well, you're just city folk, you're going to leave. Like, there's not, like, even 10 years later, there was still that conversation of like, you're actually not here for this community, which is it used to be a booming farming community, and then all the farms left. So it was sort of, well, I wouldn't say it's impoverished because that's not the right word, but it was a community that was suffering and was seeing a lot of people who were like buying houses and not contributing to the community. Yeah. And through a lot of work, and 10 years later, we were able to start developing that trust. And now we're able to have conversations around work like art justice, around having spaces for Native American folks, their own autonomous space in the town, when before that wouldn't have been a conversation.
Yeah, I think that also really relates to how we deal with our artistic work and thinking about like, when we go into communities, so we've done recent work in Springfield, which is only about 50 minutes away from here, and also in Jamaica Plain in Boston. And we were doing a lot of work with different groups that were particularly people of color, so Black people, Latinx people, and that work can be, when you're starting that work, you have to really create a dialogue. You can't just go in and be like, we are the professionals here. We know what we're doing, and this is how it's going to happen. We're going to be on this street, and we're going to have this parade down here, and this store over here is going to have to deal with it when we walk down and their customers can't come in. So a lot of our artistic work, especially with different communities that is not Ashfield, is very similar. It's like we have to move at the speed of trust. We have to build the relationship over time. And it's not like we create something that's like, here it is, goodbye. Like, we go there, we create over months and months of making work with the community. Then we come back home for a little bit, we go back, we create more again. We talk to people in the community, like, what is it that you might want to see? What is it that would just bring you joy to see happening in this community? And we work with a lot of youth in those projects. And they also are very vocal. They will let you know right from the get, I don't like that, and I'm not doing that. Yeah. So it's really great when you have that level of communication, especially working with youth. It can be something. And I think there's a lot of assumptions that people have when they go into community about what someone needs or what a community needs. And they already have a lot there. And so our jobs, I think, is to see and hear and listen to what they're saying. And so I think that's really important about our artistic work and how we move into community.
And I think Lori wrote about in case people can't read the chat, every time someone says the word community here in our rural area, particularly those of us from away, I have to ask which one. The word often carries a lot of assumptions. And I totally agree. It's also like people don't, especially, I call them city folk, but especially folks who are not from rural areas, the assumptions about what a rural area is super important. So when we're talking about going into community, we work with partners, and it's really important that we have a partner that's based in wherever we're going, and they are the ones who have those conversations with us around who are the folks we should be talking to. And I think about that the same here. Like, Double Edge is not the only community of Ashfield. There's totally. and that, like, that assumption a lot of times from people who are coming from outside, like if I'm bringing in a resident who is a queer person of color, non-binary, I'm like, this is Double Edge, and this is the community that I can speak to right here. And these are our values. But outside of this community, I cannot speak for the values of those folks. I can say what I think might happen, but those values, I want to honor the honesty that we believe in, because if I say everybody in this town agrees with me, I'm lying. Yeah. Community is a tricky word, because on the one hand, I think, like, very strongly, my town, I grew up here, we have a strong sense of community when faced with like people who are not from here, but that's not always right. And that's not always what I would say brave. And more than that, it's not always accurate, because people can agree with you from all over the place. So what we think, especially when we're talking about all of these things, is who are the people, who are the local voices in the room with you? Yeah. Because I can never go into somebody else's home and say, I know what to do here. You have to listen to the folks from there. And sometimes you do get it wrong. I will say sometimes you listen to the wrong voices, or you listen to not all the right voices, not all the folks that should be in the room are in the room. Yeah. You can't always get it right. And almost always you're going to get some part of it wrong. But also not doing anything, for instance, leads to its own set of issues. Yeah, and I think, thanks, Lori, for bringing that up, because it makes me also think about the power that language has, and the power that we have as human beings to shape that language.
And it becomes, I feel always in conflict. Like language is changing so quickly. Like even like I am 27. So when I was in college, I think one or two people were talking about pronouns in my college. Like, and then as time keeps going, everyone sort of, besides like he or she, like that was like they, them, or whatever else someone wants to identify as, wasn't it, like we weren't talking about it in certain ways. And now it's, so many things are changing and transforming, and I love it. But it's also hard sometimes. How do you know the next thing or the next thing, or how do I just want to be identified that's not this or that or that or this? Like I've been talking about this a lot, about my identity. Like I'm so multifaceted. I think a lot of people ask me to different conversations or conferences, especially in this area, because of my Latino-ness or my Blackness. And it's so minimalizing. And I think that's the same thing with community. You have to really be in dialogue on a human level. Like you have to meet people at where they're at and where they want to be going. And I think a part of our job as artists is to do that, is to listen, is to be like, this is what a lot of people are telling us. And then sometimes you will get it wrong, and other times it will be glorious and people will celebrate what you're doing or how you've uplifted something. But it's a tricky thing. And I'm always thinking about, how do I articulate myself? And I think one of the great things of this COVID time for Double Edge was that we had the space to actually go back into how do we re-articulate ourselves. And one thing that, if you look at our website in the coming days, or our different social media, you can see a case statement that we've just made, that has a lot more articulation about who we are and what we do and what our values are and why we think that we should be continuing this work for years to come. Because not everything, and I'm experiencing this right now with theaters, especially, a lot of theaters are shutting down. A lot of theaters are feeling that they're probably obsolete right now. Like I don't need to, it's the work that I want to make probably doesn't need the space that other work needs to be making. And so I think it's really important about the power of language and how we articulate ourselves. And also then for us, our body speaks so much, and how do we articulate that in a space too? Because sometimes you can come in and be overpowering to that space. And that's sometimes not good, especially when you're a company that looks like we do. It can be really intimidating and pushing away. So hopefully we always create a space for honesty and truth and dialogue, and not the performative justice, which I see a lot of, especially when people are thinking about going to different places which they're not from.
Yeah, it all takes time.
Yeah.
If anyone's like, oh, I can, and this is, I was identifying this a lot. It's like, whenever I see somebody and they're like, oh, I can come into your community and do this, I'm like, no. Like, if you know anything, it's that we move, what is it, slow and low. It's everything, like very slowly and with little movements upward. It takes that time, and it really is important. That being said, there are some moments when you do have to react strongly to folks in your own community, and those are also important and vital. I do really love that you said that, though, because especially I think in rural areas, the stereotype of ruralness is a really unfortunate stereotype, and is one that often gets in the way of justice conversations. Sometimes I find especially the lack of recognition on a national scale of sort of the justice work being done in rural areas is really, it's unfortunate. Especially when I'm seeing a lot of rural arts organizations doing really incredible work right now in COVID and before that ruralness gets sort of sucked into that stereotype. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. I think maybe we can open it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Let's open it up for some conversation. You could just keep it to the chat. I definitely invite you, if you want to, turn on your microphone and ask a question. But yeah, we can have this next short period of time to dialogue about things that you're like, you said this thing and I have this question about that, or you can even disagree.
Yeah. We love disagreement.
We love disagreement. Yeah, we do it all the time.
And also, if somebody wants to DM us, that's totally fine as well with
Yeah,
a
totally.
question or a thought.
But yeah, we'll give some space now so that it doesn't have to be like a right away, like
Yeah.
something, but
Northampton is where you go dancing?
yeah, Northampton.
I go dancing in Northampton or in Springfield is where we would go dancing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting, like, there's also the question of where do we go? I just always think it's like ways to say, like, this is our first step. This is what we're gonna do. And so I think it's always interesting to take a moment to think where we're gonna go next.
Yeah.
Yeah. And don't feel any pressure to, I can also ask, we had some questions prepared. too, if you
Yeah,
wanted to
for
ask
sure.
them. So how do you incorporate art justice into your individual practice?
Yeah. Me.
Yes.
Yeah. I sort of spoke about this a little bit before, but I'm an actor. I'm also a filmmaker. Those are the things that I've, let's say, maybe trained to some capacity to try to do in my life, and I'm doing them, so that's a great thing. But how I practice that really is, one interesting thing is that I was really scared of the outside world. One thing is I'm allergic to trees and to grass and different flowers. So I don't know how I'm living in a space like this where basically I'm just surrounded by those things, but I'm surviving. And it actually is so beautiful for me to figure out what that dialogue is for myself. Like, how do I be in the grass? How do I work in those spaces? And another one is I've never really had animals in my life. So coming here and thinking about how I incorporate sort of art justice into my life and work is I love now working outside. I love being in nature, and I love to find a more acute sensitivity to how I dialogue with that. When sometimes it feels like you're not getting any feedback and that the environment is just doing what it does. But I found over time and within my work that I was really quite interested in thinking about the magic of the environment and the magic of animals and what they have to offer me as a performer. And so quite a bit of my work deals with the animal world. And I do a lot of shape shifting. And so how I've come to see what I want to uplift is that animals also, and the plants and the trees, and this world has a life. And right now I can really hear the environment just screaming at us, because saying to us, look at all of these things that are happen that you've done to me. Please take more care for me. And so that really has like, in being in this space, I never really thought about the environment in some ways. Like, I was just like, I'm moving through, I'm a young person, I don't really care about anything besides myself. And through my work and through my artistic work, I can really have a more sensitivity to being like, I have to change my ways if I'm going to continue to cohabitate and continue to coexist together, because it seems really scary right now. Like, even the weather changes, like what I'm experiencing feels so different. Like, I feel like seasons, like were whole in some ways for me in my youth. Like, and as I've grown, as I keep going in each year, it seems like the winter is now becoming extended in some ways, or shrunk. Like, in each year, it's so different. And that feels like, to me, or the weather is changing so fast, like it's snowing one day and then it's 60, 70 degrees here. I mean, it's crazy to see that. And it just feels like they're asking me, the world is asking me, the environment is asking me to try to make a change, or try to make a difference. And so that was maybe one of the most surprising things about how art justice has been incorporated into my work, and how I want to uplift something else. So what about you?
It's an interesting question. I made it up and I didn't have an answer ready. So I think that a large part of the work that I do is also not just with Double Edge, but I'm part of the gender equity group at Alternate Roots, which is, for those of folks who don't know, it's a Southern organization based on a bunch of different arts folks and organizations in the South, most in areas of the South. And I have been, I'm a non-voting member because obviously I don't live in the region, but a lot of what I do is support. And one of the things that I've been really engaged with is sort of the idea of incorporating just a tiny bit of art into every moment of work. And that is also really important in justice, specifically because a lot of folks can't, engagement in a lot of different ways is difficult for a lot of different folks, depending on their access needs and sort of where they're going. So just having a moment, a friend of mine recently brought in this practice that I'm trying to incorporate into most of my meetings, which is that for people who speak English as a second language, for every 30 minutes that you have a meeting, you take a minute of a break. And that allows folks who have English as a second language to catch up, or to ask questions, or to say, I need some explanation. And it's been something I'm trying to incorporate a tiny bit more into my daily practice, and something I'm not always succeeding at. But I really love the idea of learning a new thing. And that is what I think is quintessential to my belief of art justice, is the flexibility to be responsive and learn new things and new practices all the time. But that's where I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's fast. It's there's so many ways that I can see it now, but I think it's important because it's been articulated. Like, I really find that, like, articulation as a young person who's been told that maybe my voice isn't, like, I won't be heard in this space, or I won't I want this, I want that, you need to wait till you're 40 to even be having a real substantial voice in the world. I really felt that as this art justice was being articulated, it became a key for me to being like, I think my community that I'm in right now with Double Edge wants to hear my voice. I think they want to see me from where I'm coming from. And so that has really expanded my reach into how much I'm willing to share. And I think that's so important for me as an actor, because that's my job. My job is sharing. And my job is to to tell stories. And a lot of that has been shaped by how much I trust that these folks here and what I, the group that I've chosen to be with for the past 5 years is really uplifting me to do that. So, and then I can get crazy, I can get wild, which is so cool. I can crawl around like a hyena and laugh, and I could howl at the moon and it's okay. It's fine. We have a performance called Howling at the Moon coming up.
Yeah.
That's an outdoor show. So that's why I brought up Howling at the Moon, because I hope to be howling at the moon for some of that performance. So
Yeah, I think that's well, do you want to, I don't think also in honor of, there's a lot of emotional things going on. I don't think we need to keep people super long if folks haven't got any more questions, but there's anything else you want to say about art justice or your personal experiences?
I mean, the only thing is just that I want to say is with everything happening right now and that's been happening and will unfortunately will continue to happen. I just want to say that it's really something for me that I get to go to work and create art every single day. And I hope that everyone in this space has their joys and their loves that they can take with them into the future in the hardest moments of your life, whenever that is. I hope you have something that just brings you joy and that really helps you to find that desire and that says, this feels just, this feels like a way to move forward, and know that from over here in Nashville, Massachusetts, that I'm reaching my arms out to you and saying, we're doing this together. So I really appreciate you all being here with us, with me at this very difficult, but also feels uplifting time to say that some justice can continue to be served with some of the horror that's happening in our world. So I'm reaching out.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Yeah. Thanks all so much. You can, maybe I'll put an email address here. What's a good one? The office. I'm going to put our email here. And if you have any questions that you want to ask us that you didn't happen here, or just want to know information about what we're doing, or come see our work or anything like that, just feel free to email us at
that directly.
Yeah, and email that. Oh, I didn't, sorry. To everyone. Where is everyone? There it is. Yeah, feel free to email stuff at office@doubleedgetheater.org. And so thank you all so much. Thanks for being here with us.